Hi everyone, welcome to Managerial Accounting. Managerial accounting, you are going to learn, is different than financial accounting. The good news is there will not be a lot of journal entries in managerial accounting, so we really have to understand the concepts used. That's how it will definitely be different than financial. You will notice in this video I'm going to go over some of the slides pretty quickly, and the reason being is that I will have separate homework problems on that. So let's begin. Okay, so why is managerial accounting important? Managerial accounting is going to provide information for managers. It's going to help managers make better decisions. How is managerial accounting going to help them? It's going to break out the costs. So it will help them come up with the exact cost of a product. It will help them come up with a decision on whether to buy a fixed asset or not. Okay? Financial accounting is focused for mainly external. It is internal, all right? Managerial is only internal, but financial is focused on internal and external. The external uses of mainly financial accounting are investors and creditors. Okay, there's also the IRS. They care about financial as well. Okay, all right, so this is a large concept. So I'm not going to read it word by word. I'm just going to talk to you about the differences between financial and managerial accounting. So financial accounting is external. External users are going to look at that. Creditors, investors, like I already said, the IRS. Managerial is only internal. So management is going to look at managerial accounting to make better decisions. The purpose of information for financial accounting is going to help investors and creditors make decisions. Investors, do I want to invest in the company? Creditors, do I want to lend this company money? They want to see to make sure that their money will get paid back, or in the case of for a creditor, an investor, that the company is going to make money for them. Whereas managerial is going to help managers and employees plan. They're going to plan on whether they're going to hire new employees. It's going to help them direct employees to be more efficient in certain areas and help control operations. Okay, so financial. Financial is mainly focused on the past, whereas managerial is mainly focused on the future. Financial follows a lot of rules, okay? GAAP is very extensive in their principles for accountants and companies, managers to follow, whereas managerial does not follow GAAP, okay? So that's important. Make sure you write that down. The scope of information for financial is based on the whole business, the entire business, whereas managerial is focused on one piece, one part of the business. They're going to look at a certain area to maybe, improve operations. Financial, behavioral, it's going to help with disclosures, and managerial is going to focus on employees' behavior, to look at that. All right, now we're going to move on, so take some good notes. In managerial, you have to classify cost used in managerial accounting. So like financial, if I had you in financial 1 or 2, I made you focus on debit and credit. Whereas managerial, yes, we will look at some debit and credit, but I'm going to promise you it won't be a lot. But right now, I want you to get down classifying costs. This is very important. All right. So how are costs classified? Well, it's broken out. If you have a service business, they're going to sell their time, their skill, and knowledge. What type of service companies? They're selling a service, a hairdresser, an accountant, a lawyer. Merchandising companies, what do? They're going to resell products. They are not producing the product, they are reselling it. Manufacturing, we're going to focus on that a lot in managerial accounting. They are going to use labor, equipment, raw materials, and plants and factories to convert these products into the final finished good. Okay, so manufacturing companies, they're going to have 3 kinds of inventory. Here, write these down. Raw materials. So the raw materials is when they first buy the product. Then when they start working on the product. So you'll read a lot of these words and they'll say they requisition the materials. What does that mean? That means they went and got the materials and they took them out and now they're starting to work on the product. When they're working on the product, the next category it will go to is work in process. This will be, again, one more time, when they're working on the product. It's also known as WIP to make it easier, okay? The next category it will go to is finished goods. Those are goods that are finished but have not been sold yet. So they sit in finished goods until they are sold. And when they are sold, they will go to cost of goods sold. Okay, so kind of draw a diagram. It will start with raw materials, then it will go to work in process, then it will go to finished goods, and then it will finally go to cost of goods sold when you've sold that. Okay, again, please, good notes. Direct cost. A direct cost is a cost that can be easily and cost effectively traced to a cost object. A cost object is anything for which managers want a separate measurement of costs. So your direct costs will mostly be direct labor and direct materials. If it's not a direct material and a direct labor, you will learn the category that it will go into is indirect costs. So let me go on to the next slide to break down. Here's the next slide. So take good notes on this. Product costs will either be direct materials, direct labor, or manufacturing overhead. Direct materials are just that. They're raw materials that are used in production. They're direct materials. They directly touch the product. Direct labor is labor of employees who directly touch the product. So when you do some of the practice problems, some of them will come to you immediately, and some you really have to think on. Did the person touch the product? If they didn't, then they're going to be indirect labor. If the material didn't directly touch the product, it will be an indirect material. Sometimes, rightfully so, students say, well, Professor Clay, let's think of a mountain bike. So a mountain bike, you put on the chain. Well, that will definitely be a direct material, but after the mountain bike is all done, if you take some oil and put that on the chain to help the chain move faster, that will be an indirect material. Why? Students say that touched the product. It's because it's cheap, and management do not want to keep track of cheap materials. It's just too time consuming. They want to keep track of the heavy hitters, direct materials and direct labor. Okay? All right, so write down some examples of manufacturing overhead, factory costs for rent, utilities, insurance. However, be very careful that it says it's associated with the factory. Okay? All right, and then this next slide I'm going to skip over pretty quickly because I just went through that. All right, now take notes. Here's the difference between a prime and conversion costs. So prime costs combine the costs of direct materials and direct labor. So prime costs are direct material and direct labor. Conversion costs combine direct labor with manufacturing overhead. So kind of write that in your notes. Notice that direct labor is in between the two, prime and conversion costs. All right, another important concept. I'm going to try not to make my videos too long to keep you all awake, but this first one will be longer because these concepts are really important, and if you've never seen it before, you got to get this. All right, the difference between a product and a period cost. Product costs include the cost of purchasing or making the product. So product costs will be your direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead. Period costs are costs that are not part of making the product. They're kind of like a side cost. What are examples? Anything to do with selling. Please write that in your notes. Anything for selling will always be a period cost. Anything to do with administration will always be a period cost. Sometimes, rightfully so, some of the questions will be hard where, it's a paper plant and they hire scientists to go out and assess the forest. That will be a period cost. Okay, so those scientists, those salaries will be a period cost. Ultimately, when it comes to the cost of that paper, so if the wood, of course that would be a product cost, but break out the difference between a product and a period cost. Here's why this is important. Product costs sit in inventory until the product is sold. So product costs are initially an asset until they're sold. So they'll sit on the balance sheet until the product is sold. Period costs, boom, they're going to hit the income statement immediately. Okay? So make sure you understand those concepts. That next slide is just breaking it down even more. Okay, you'll do types of problems like this where you'll break out period costs and product costs. Remember, if it says something like this, you have depreciation of the administration's computers, that will be a period cost. If it says depreciation on the factory computers, that will be a product cost. So read the transaction and make sure you're clear on whether it's a period or a product cost. Okay, financial statements. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. So financial statements, basically accounting one, you did a lot of service companies where there's no inventory, and counting two, you start seeing cost of goods sold. Actually, accounting one, we bring in cost of goods sold as well. So service companies will not have cost of goods sold. Merchandising and manufacturing will. Let me go to the next slide. Here's an example of just a service company. Their balance sheet is the first one. The second one is a merchandising company. Look at the merchandising. They just have inventory. That's it, because they're buying and reselling that inventory. Look at the manufacturing. They're breaking it out. They're breaking out raw materials. they're breaking out work in process, and they're breaking out finished goods. Those are all asset accounts. Okay, so write that in your notes. Raw materials, work in process, finished goods are an asset account. Okay, so I'm going to go through this quick. Showed you an example of an income statement. Okay, I'm going to have separate homework problems on this, so I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. You want to go back and see that at a later time, you may do that. Okay, here's another diagram. So remember, it starts at raw materials. Then it goes to work in process. But look at how they're breaking it out, work in process. There's direct materials, there's direct labor, there's manufacturing overhead. Manufacturing overhead, we'll do separate practice problems on that where you will start breaking that out more. Ultimately goes to work in process, then it goes to finished goods, sits there until it's sold, and when it's sold, it ultimately goes to cost of goods sold. All right. I am going to have separate homework problems on these where you'll calculate direct materials used, you'll calculate total manufacturing costs, and you'll calculate cost of goods manufactured. I'm going to go through this very quickly now because I will have separate videos showing you how to do the practice problems. And I don't want to make this extremely long and boring. Okay, we'll do a practice problem on that. We'll do a practice problem on this. Let me stop on this one more just because calculating the cost of goods manufacturing, please look at manufacturing overhead. That's going to be your indirect costs. Remember, see where it says depreciation? It's associated with plant and equipment, all right? That is for the factory. Then it says plant utilities, insurance and property taxes. It has to say that for us because if it just said utilities, rightfully so, you would say, Professor Clay, is this related to administration or is this related to the plant? So the problem and myself, when I test, I have to be specific so that you know it's directly related to the plant or factory. That's important because that will be a product cost. Whereas if it's just administration utilities, that will be a period cost. Okay, calculating cost of goods manufactured, I will have a separate video and I'll show you how to do that. I'll write on a whiteboard and you can see that. By the time you're done, we will do an elongated problem where you will finally figure cost of goods manufactured. I don't like to do that in the first week. I like to do separate practice problems. After we start working, by the time I test, I will have you do an elongated one like this. We move on. Finally, calculating cost of goods sold. Again, I will have a separate video. Okay, I'm going to skip through this. All right, there's the flow if you just want to see to help yourself. All right, so I'm going to end there. And again, I will have separate slides for each of these activities. Okay, see you soon.